Hi again then guys, and welcome to another Rivals matchup on Gran Turismo, and this time we're going for a slightly more back to basics rivalry between just two vehicles which have had a heated battle both on the road and on the track a number of times over the years with different generations. One car has been around significantly longer than the other, and funnily enough has actually outlived the other, and that is the Corvette. The Corvette, of course, originated in the 50s, whereas the Viper concept came out, I believe, at the turn of the 90s, and now, of course, the Viper is gone, whereas the Corvette is still around, which is a shame, because the Viper is still a relatively unique car on the market. But for this particular Rivals match, we're actually changing it up a bit. These are not going to be tuned. These are going to be stock ZR1 versus stock ACR. Not even an oil change. The only thing which I've changed is the tyres. That's it. And even then, we're not running on racing tyres. So, let's see how the cars compare. So first up, of course, we have the Corvette, the C6 generation ZR1. This is a favourite of many Corvette fans. I know many of you guys love the ZR1. Personally, I don't love this version as much as some other Corvettes. My personal favourite generation is the C4 in, funnily enough, ZR1 form. That is my favourite Corvette of all time. The C6 ZR1, not so much. I respect its performance, but to me the greatest thing about a Corvette is similar to that which makes the Nissan GTR so good, and that is how much performance it gives you in an affordable package. The ZR1 doesn't really offer that in the same way as the, say, Z06 or even the normal C6 do. It's a very expensive car. This is a 185 grand machine, which is 85 grand more than the Viper. Even this Viper ACR, which is of course the top of the Viper tree. Now, as far as performance, both vehicles are of course extremely quick, but the way they approach their performance is slightly different. The ZR1 is more of an exotic version of the Corvette, whereas the ACR isn't as much an exotic version of a Viper, it's more a track-focused version of the Viper, whereas although it is to some degree, that's not really the purpose of the ZR1 for the Corvette. It's not necessarily as much of a pure track car as the Viper is in this matchup. But what it does offer is incredible straight line performance, a huge amount of power, and funnily enough, despite the fact that the ACR is the lightweight Viper, the Corvette is still the lighter of the two. So as far as all-round ability, the Corvette is a fantastic vehicle. How, though, does the Viper compare? Well, the Viper ACR is, of course, a remarkably quick road car. It has one of the highest PP levels of any road car in the game on Gran Turismo, and in terms of sheer numbers and sheer ability, it's a very difficult car to beat. The PP level is over 700, the handling is fantastic, the power is over 1100 horsepower, huge amount of torque. The weight isn't that bad considering how big the car is and how big its engine is. Speaking, of course, of engines, it has one of the largest engines in the game. And, of course, in terms of performance as well, the Viper ACR is a remarkable track car. It's designed for that. It's designed to be that bridge between the regular Viper and the Viper GTSR racing versions. And it does that beautifully. It's a fantastic track car for the road, and it's a beloved version of the Viper, just like the ZR1 is a beloved version of the Corvette. And it would be interesting to know, and it would be difficult to find out, but it would be cool to know which of these is actually more popular on Gran Turismo. I think the slight edge may go to the Viper ACR in terms of how many people use it, and also how regularly, but I think it would probably be fairly close between the two cars. They are certainly both very, very widely loved, and although I already mentioned that I don't like the ZR1 as much as some other Corvettes, I think of the two cars, I do prefer the ZR1 compared to the Viper. I don't dislike the Viper, but again, I think I just have to give the slight edge to the Corvette because I am a huge Corvette fan in general. So that's it for our overview. What though about the stock numbers? Which one wins on paper? Well, let's find out. Well, first up, of course, we have the price, and we already mentioned the fact that the Viper ACR is significantly cheaper than the Corvette. 85,000 credits less is nothing to be sniffed at. Both cars cost six figures, but the Viper nonetheless is a significantly cheaper car, and both vehicles, I would say, are among the best value cars in the game in terms of how much performance you get for their respective price, considering that they are, in many cases, a lot cheaper than, say, a supercar. More often than not, at least. As far as engine capacity, well, that point pretty obviously goes to the Viper. Of course it does. It's an 8.4 litre to the Corvette's 6.2. The Corvette being smaller even than the Z06, which is a 7 litre. As far as PP points, though, that one, perhaps surprisingly, but then again perhaps not, goes to, again, the Viper, but not by much. Only 7 PP points separates the two, and the fact that the Viper is a more focused track car does of course contribute to that. As far as horsepower though, it actually swings in favour of the Corvette. Now when they're fully tuned, the Viper is more powerful, but in stock form, the ZR1 actually beats it by around 30 or so horsepower, which is a pretty decent margin. Both have over 600 horses to work with, which is certainly more than enough, respectively, in real life. As far as torque, and this is perhaps the most surprising of the match, again, it actually goes to the Corvette. You'd probably think that being a massive engine vehicle, one of the biggest engine production cars you can get, in fact, and also just by the nature of it being a Viper, which is kind of a modern-day hot rod, you'd probably expect the Viper to have more torque, maybe even significantly more torque, but it actually doesn't. It's got around 40 foot-pounds of torque less than the ZR1, which of course for ZR1 fans is good news. As far as weight, again, perhaps surprisingly, but perhaps not, given that they are both pretty big vehicles, the Corvette is actually also lighter, which is kind of ironic, given that the ACR is more of a pure track car than the ZR1. But, nevertheless, the ZR1 is around 40 to 50 kilos-ish, in that kind of region, lighter. Both cars, though, weigh over 1,500 kilos. And of course, with more power and also less weight, the ZR1 by definition is going to have the higher horsepower per ton. But it's funny to see how the horsepower per ton on these stock vehicles with realistic numbers compares to the kind of power to weight ratios that you can get from tuned cars on Gran Turismo. When we run through the daily reviews on the channel, you will often come up against stuff like sedans and hatchbacks, which can actually rival these two cars for horsepower per ton ratio, because of course they're tuned. So it just goes to show the kind of difference that in-game tuning makes, compared to the numbers on a stock car in real life form, which in comparison don't really sound that impressive. But of course in real life, these are among the quickest street cars you can buy. And of course, as always, we do not count the lap time a point, because of course it could be different on a different track with a different driver. In this case, not with different tuning, but certainly with the other two variables at play. But it is interesting to note, and this did surprise me actually, that the Corvette, at least with me driving on Laguna Seca, was the quicker of the two by over a second. That did surprise me, and I found that the Viper overall, at least with the stock tuning and upgrades, or without any tuning and upgrades in other words, felt surprisingly heavy through the corners. It is over 1,500 kilos, but still it felt surprisingly stiff for a track car, but not in a good way. Whereas the ZR1, on the other hand, felt a little bit more fluid, a bit more tail-happy, I would say a little bit more fun as well. And although there are certainly tracks where the Viper would probably win, even in stock form, on this occasion, the ZR1 was the quicker of the two. Now overall, which one wins? Well, I personally expected it to be the Viper ACR by a pretty easy margin. It's got a massive engine, the Viper's known for having big numbers, but it is a close battle between the two, and overall, the Corvette actually wins in stock form, which of course is a totally different scenario to in fully tuned form. In fully tuned form, the Viper would win, but in stock form, the Viper gets 3 points to the Corvette's 4. So a very, very close battle between the two. The Viper dominates price, engine size and PP level. The Corvette, though, dominates power, torque, weight, and horsepower per ton. So it's very interesting to see how the two compare. Both, though, are full premiums with good upgrades and fantastic trackability, and whichever one you buy and whichever one you use, you will be very happy, I think, with the performance that they give you, both in a straight line, obviously, but also around a track. These can give any Japanese or European exotic a great run for their money. So overall, that's it for this particular Rivals matchup, and I'll see you guys next time. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.